when I was in London, I got very lucky and was nominated onto the inaugural steering committee for the International Managers Forum. And this had people like Ed Bicknell, who's Dire Straits manager, Elliot Dodd, who's managing Simply Red, Gail Coulson, who was the Pretenders manager. Paul McGuinness was an honorary member because he was traveling the world at the time, U2. It was all these heavyweight managers, and I got to be the alternative person on the committee. So it was very educational. And the reason it was formed is because of draconian recording contract terms. One of them was PPL, which was a secret fund that unless you knew about it as an artist, you would not get your portion. You had to apply to get your portion. And if you did not, the label would collect 100%. If you did, you'd get 50%. So, of course, the labels didn't say anything, and it accounted, allegedly, for 60% of their profit. And for a label to go to every single manager and negotiate this is just overwhelming situations. So as a group, it was easier for them to deal with managers. Mind you, we brought the subject up. But it was a way to discuss industry terms with a group of people that had a lot of experience and could affect change in a fair way. We were threatened. That's how we saw it, as being fair and equitable, but the labels were not happy about it in the beginning. With Napster, I was in a unique position, a perception to see what was going on, because I was an artist management and I was working a lot with labels through the producers, so I was able to see a lot of different perceptions on it. And I also knew a lot of hackers. And initially, hackers promoted Napster because it was a protest against the draconian terms of the record labels that they were reaming the artists. So there was a logo, a no major label logo, in support of the artists. Now, labels would say that Napster killed the industry, but really it was the public saying, give artists better terms. And this has been going on in the industry since the beginning of it. What happened was the labels decided to approach it like it was a bootleg, a street bootleg, and they started suing grandmothers and children for downloading tracks, rather than addressing it was time to find a system with which to sell music on the internet. They just didn't want to do it for some reason. Like film were ahead of the ball, publishing were ahead of the ball. That's why you don't see as much stealing going on in the publishing world. So what happened then was Napster and the labels got together. And Napster said, look, let's work together. We'll give you our software. And the labels didn't want to make a fair deal, so it didn't happen. So then everything went on for 10 years, and by then a whole generation was used to downloading music for free and expected it. And the whole pro-artist thing was forgotten. Now, streaming's still fairly new as a business model. And what's happened is the major labels have demanded large sums of money to license the tracks to Spotify, Pandora, etc. Very little of that gets to the artist, very little. And then these streamers that's why they want to pay less royalty, is because they're already paying these huge funds to the labels. So the person suffering at the end of all that is the artist, which is the reason for the streaming and the labels. Like or hate Trump, he did bring in a new royalty for musicians, or he helped facilitate it. He agreed to it. So people's royalties started going up. And I talked to a musician who was getting $100 a month in their royalties on an old project, now got $300. So it's not a lot, but it's much better. And it encouraged him to start making music again, where he was discouraged before. He'd stopped. So what happened this week is Google, Amazon, Spotify, Pandora, they all independently, not as a class action, independently appealed all at the same time. I mean, it's a concerted effort. Now, this is particularly ironic to me in Google's case because they're a multi-billion-dollar organization, but they've also been profiting off of pirating music with ads. So it's just reaming the artist again and again because they think they can. The thing is, you need to be on these streaming services in order to get momentum going. And I would like to think that there's a way that all these cogs could work together and cooperate without having to steal everything for themselves. If you steal all the marbles, there's nobody to play with, and everybody else suffers. And there is a way for everything to be equitable. In the meantime, until that happens, the best way people can support artists is to shop independent and self-released. So don't steal from a self-released independent artist or an independent label. Buy their merchandising, go to their shows. Don't try and blag free tickets and say you're a journalist when you're not, because we can see through that. And it's $10 oftentimes, $10, $15. This enables them to tour. It enables them to make music and not have to sign to a major label who's going to prohibit them financially, creatively sometimes. There's pros and cons to major labels. But right now, if you have an independent artist that you love, support them. So the internet was a great thing when it started, and it still is. It has its pros and cons. One of the cons is that it created A&R by A numbers, meaning it started with MySpace. The label started hiring people that were kind of data A&R. They would go around and see who had the most plays and then sign those bands based on the numbers of their players. And of course, people could rig them. This went on for quite a few years, and some really talented A&R people were fired. And what happened was that art was lost for a while. And people then started getting songs from the publisher that really had no meaning. They were one-dimensional lyrics that anybody could sing. Getting somebody in that could sing that may or may not write, dressing them up with sparkles and eyelashes or whatever, and putting these components together. I call it fabricated acts. So A&R was a lost art for a long time. It is starting to come back. We are starting to see more and more real instrumentation getting supported by the labels. So this is good. I hope that leads to independent labels who get support from majors, and we get people like David Geffen and Jerry Moss and these great A&R people that were really record people. Jerry Moss used to say, I'm just a record guy. But they understood artists. They understood the environment to give them in order for them to be creatively productive and at the same time grow their career. It takes time and sensitivity, and it pays off. That's what I hope. So hopefully this sheds some light on how the industry works in reality, and I hope people will see the reason to support independent artists and self-release artists. It is very important for real music and real art to survive, not be squished by a big machine, even though a big machine can be helpful in some cases. Buy independent.